So thank you everyone for joining the second panel that we planned for Digital Art Month about virtual reality in art. So when you join, especially if you're new to our panels that you don't know, you will see that you're automatically muted. The chat is available to you for any comments or questions that you might have. Myself and the team will continue to monitor the chat. I am Giulia Archetti and I'm part of the CADAF team and I'll be moderating today's panel. The other thing is that we record all of our panels, which you will then find in our YouTube channel. But of course, you're more than welcome to turn on your video, but if you don't want to appear, then you can leave it off. Apologies for the delay. I think we should now start and not keep our participants waiting too long. Thank you and welcome to Allegra Shorto, Art Director at Khora Contemporary, Myriam Achard, Chief New Media Partnership and Public Relations at Pi Center in Montreal, and Winslow Porter, Director, Producer, and Creative Technologist. Winslow, I know that you're much more than that as well. I just tried to sort of summarize, but you can tell us definitely more about what you do and who you are throughout the panel. Now, I was saying to our guest just a moment ago before I admitted everyone that I am a little bit of a newbie in the field of new media art and therefore also in virtual reality. So for me today, I am very happy to moderate the panel, but it will be a learning experience for me just as much as maybe some of the participants today. But the one thing I know, because I also use a lot of the technology in my everyday life, is that digitization has become a big player in everything that we do. So in our daily routine, but also in art. Not only the way art is created, which we're going to talk about it in a second, but also the way that we perceive art. And to this, I want to go to Myriam and perhaps ask her about the experience with new media arts at the Pi Center. Now, you obviously, as a center, as a museum, you say that you're open to art in all of its form, which obviously includes new media art. And you know, you've had exhibitions in the past of virtual reality, artificial intelligence. You now have an initiative that it's called VR to Go, where people can rent a VR headsets to watch movies. So there's a lot that you're doing for new media art. Can you tell us a little bit more about this and also how the public has responded to these initiatives?
So yeah, hi everybody. First, thank you for the invitation. Very happy to be here. Nice to be with Allegra and Winslow. We actually showed the work from Winslow at the Phi Center called Tree. We also show the work that Khora produced. If I'm not mistaken, it was the bridge at the center like a couple of years ago. So maybe just to give you some context about the Phi Center, we are located in Montreal. We opened our doors 8 years ago. When we opened at that time, it was really like all our programming was about all forms of art. So live music events, traditional film screenings, a lot of conferences and talks, exhibition. But one day, and that's where maybe our mandate changed a little bit towards art and technology, our founder and director, Phoebe Greenberg, met with a studio that was at that time not known at all, and their name is Felix and Paul Studio, who are now recognized as a pioneer in the virtual reality world. She met with them and she tried VR for the first time. And for her, she had at that time this aha moment where she went like, okay, I want to be part of that new, of VR. So that's how we started slowly to have VR exhibitions at the center on a very small scale, and then it became bigger and bigger and bigger. So right now in a normal like normally, and we're not in a normal time right now, but normally we do have 2 to 3 major exhibitions a year that are dedicated to art and technology, and that involves VR, yes, but also AR, XR. Right now, unfortunately, we had to close down again before the pandemic. So just to give you the context, we closed our doors mid-March. We were allowed to reopen at the end of June. We stayed open from end of June till October 1st, and now we are closed again, hopefully only until the end of October, but we'll see about that. So when we reopened our doors in June, we had no idea if the public, how the public would react, you know, to an exhibition that is at the intersection between art and technology, that involves VR, after going through like a pandemic. Would people be ready to put a VR headset on their head in a public space? And the answer is yes, definitely. We had a lot of success with our exhibition called Emergence and Convergence. We also had a lot of success showing Venice VR Expanded in September. We actually were sold out for the entire run, 1,000 tickets sold for on 10 days, which for us was really a sign that people wanted to try VR, like go back to VR in a public space. And that was a very good sign for us. And then Giulia, you mentioned our initiative called VR to Go. This initiative was actually launched during the confinement, where the question was, people cannot come to us physically anymore to try VR. How can we go to people's home? And that's how this project came to life, where we were and are still doing it, renting VR headset, on which we have right now 10 films that I chose actually. People are keeping the headset for 48 hours. So like if you're a family of 4, everybody at home can try it. And then we pick it up back and it goes to somewhere else. And this project was really successful. And we actually can see that now that all the cultural spaces are closed in Montreal, the VR to Go project goes up again. So it's really an interesting, it was really interesting for us to see the evolution, you know, of the VR project, like the VR to Go project.
Well, I guess it's a great thing that the general public is now less scared by this kind of technology, or now perhaps due to the situation that we were in the last few months, they're more willing to try things out, which is obviously something that then can stay once, you know, you try out, you know, for example, a VR headset. But this is a bit of an open question for all of you, really. And I was wondering, perhaps, you know, what is the best way, you know, aside from this initiative, for example, for the public to access, you know, VR, virtual reality artworks? This is a reflection on perhaps how sort of VR artworks are sort of expensive in terms of the technology that you need to sort of maybe experience them, and the headsets, even though they're always sort of trying to come out with a new technology for VR headsets, they're still quite pricey. So on the one side is sort of that, it is a bit of a barrier to entry, which might be cost. But also the question is the same, both for the general public, but maybe from the point of view of the artist and the production. And perhaps this is where also Winslow and Allegra, you might come in from your point of view and your experience, whether the cost of VR or producing VR could be a barrier to entry also for artists to transition into this kind of art type.
Myriam, I didn't realize, as I was listening to you, I didn't realize about your VR to Go scheme. That's fantastic, because we thought we were working in the dark. When we were thinking up a similar scheme, we're obviously faced with the difficulty. I should probably introduce, I work for Khora Contemporary, a company that produces VR art, and we work closely with museums putting on VR exhibitions. So obviously when confinement happened, when no one could go to museums, even now when museums are opening and numbers are restricted, we've come face to face with the issue of how do we cater to an audience when they can't come to the physical space and use the headsets. So we were thinking it through, and we decided to create AR versions of the VR pieces that we have, so that people could download an app on their phone and set up the VR, or, you know, some version of the VR in their house or in there. But I mean, it's funny that I didn't know it all, but it's very similar actually to what you guys came up with. And I'm just thinking through now whether it would have been better to rent out the headsets or not, because the problem, as someone who did not have any technological background when I came to VR, learning how to set up a Vive headset is quite complicated and takes some getting used to, and there's always technical glitches and difficulties. So I just wonder how easy it would be for an audience member to, or, you know, for someone from the public who's not used to using VR to set up something like that in their house, to set up a station. And I'm curious as to whether you've received feedback since you started the scheme from your visitors as to how easy it was.
Well, actually, the type of headset we rented is the Oculus, the Go. Mm-hmm. So the most easy one to manipulate, and we actually developed a player that was, so when the people are getting the headset from us, then there's not even a controller, there is nothing. They just get the headset, they get a manual with instructions. It's case-based, so they can choose which piece they want to start with. And we actually, because we didn't know how people would react, like if somebody is doing VR for the first time at home and is not comfortable, we actually set up a chat where people could ask a technical question if they had difficulties. And actually, nobody had difficulties. And this is one of the things where we were really surprised, is that people were not complaining about having a hard time to manipulate the headset at home. They all said it was really, really easy. But that's the Go, you know, so that's the easiest one. It would be something else if you would have to rent a Rift with a computer, or the Vive with a computer, definitely.
Yeah. Oh, that's very good to know. But yeah, so in answer to your question, Giulia, that is we actually haven't had the chance to launch this because it's with a museum. We're discussing this with the museum now. So the idea would be to have the physical installation in the museum, and then also the AR component for people who can't get to the museum. You download it, and actually we have an app for our company where we have small snippets of each of the artworks we've produced as AR works, and it's really quite cool. Like, if you haven't tried it, you know, to be able to, it's obviously nothing compared to the immersion you get with a headset, but to be able to experience the work, you know, it's as though the work appears but only through your phone, and you can explore it in your house, which is, I mean, it's definitely interesting. As for your question, in terms of barrier, you know, does the cost of production act as a barrier to artists? I would say that like any medium, there's definitely cost involved. And yes, it is, you know, it's tricky for artists starting out to be able to afford to get involved. But what I've noticed is that the artists that learn to program themselves, so overcome that, the cost of production basically comes down to, can you hire a company to produce the work for you? That's really expensive. If you're talking about buying headsets, you know, that's negligible because it's a couple of $100s in the grand scope. It's not.
Yeah, yes, definitely. For the artist, it's more the
production
of the work. Yes,
totally. But the artists that take it on and actually produce the work entirely themselves, I find the results to be far more interesting, because, well, you know, not more interesting, but definitely interesting in their own right, because someone who can totally manipulate the technology and who knows what they're doing, it's like being fluent in a language. The results are always surprising, and they take the technology in new directions. And even when we step in and act as the producers, when the artist knows more about the technology rather than less, it's always interesting because they can guide the process in different ways. I don't know how you found it, Myriam or Winslow, but I think
I would love to hear Winslow's thoughts on this as well. Yes, and his experience in producing sort of VR works and Tree. And Winslow, I don't know if you were planning to share maybe the trailer of Tree, but if you weren't, would you mind if I share that?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, whenever works. As long you're driving, so you can put that up whenever works. And you have access to the file. It's on YouTube and a couple other places, but if you already have it. Yeah, or I can talk first, or do you want to show the video first?
Maybe let Let me try and show this so that people can have a sense of one of your projects in VR. Okay.
Which video? Because was it the video of the animation, or there's also a really nice video, Myriam, that you put together that shows when we showed it at the Phi Center, but I don't know if that's.
Oh, this one is the one that's that I found on Tree Official.
Okay, yeah.
Which is that okay? Is that okay? Is it
Totally fine.
well, yeah.
I've spent a lot of time in that forest. I'll tell you that much.
It's pretty fantastic. I mean, it's immersive even from a computer screen. So I can't even imagine watching it with the headset.
And so, yeah, I mean, in relating to everything that we've, that's been discussed here, we've also taken a similar approach, because with Tree, as Myriam experienced, sort of the benefit or the things that really make it stand out or that make it more immersive also make it, a task to be able to show it when it comes to public screenings. Not only are we transporting your eyes and your ears, but we also have haptic elements like a sub pack, which vibrates your body at certain points to simulate the tree growth and also the unfortunate events that happen at the end of the experience. Then we also have wind, which simulate, growing to be the tallest tree, as well as heat, which again, a little bit of a spoiler alert, there's a sort of an encroaching fire. And also, I think the most sort of unique aspect, and also in my experience, the most convincing and most immersive, is the elements of smell. We worked with International Flavors and Fragrances and a team, a couple different teams actually, that helped deliver the scent. And it was really tricky to make sure that we were producing the right amount at the right increments, not to make it overwhelming. But that is, that sort of, it gets categorized more as a feeling than something you intellectualize. And when it came to deforestation in the entire experience, that's something that we wanted the audience to really feel. That was really the most important thing. But now when it comes to, as soon as COVID happened, we had to cancel like 24 screenings. The project, with everything that's happening in the world, has actually picked up even more momentum. And, it's been, not just in the United States, but in all over Asia, as well as Europe. It's starting to really gather, an audience. And that's, for us, is really nice, because it's a difficult piece to show, say just on a VR headset by itself. It's not that it can't be shown, but certain aspects of the experience are left out. And that's a big question for us and a lot of other VR creators or experiential artists, I would say in general, is, at what point can you scale something down, and does it still retain the initial sort of character and feeling? And we think it still can. And so that's why we're interested in creating a version for the Quest and Quest 2, which just started shipping a couple days ago. And if you guys aren't familiar with the Quest, the headsets, basically it's offboarding it from a computer, but everything happens inside the headset. It's using a chip that's all built in, and if you want to get higher res graphics, you can actually plug back into a computer through a USB-C cable. And so that's really exciting, but it takes a lot more development to get something to work with all the sort of, sense of of wonder when it comes to high resolution graphics on such a small headset. And Allegra, also what you were saying too about being able to make an experience from VR to AR, that's also what we're doing right now. In a sense, we're taking the learnings from Tree, and we're working on an experience called Rainforest, where we want to be able to bring the rainforest to you. We've shown Tree to a little over 100,000 people, and while that number is really good for experiential VR, it's really quite low when it comes to, say, being able to watch a video about conservation, or any creators like channel on YouTube where they're getting tens of millions of views. While it's more immersive, we're not able to reach the same number, and there's a few million, probably a few dozen actually million now headsets, VR headsets in the wild, but there's about 3 billion AR enabled smartphones and tablets out there. So by being able to increase our audience, we're able to have it's a different kind of impact, whether or not it's as sort of as immersive and as intimate and as personal. That feeling of it happening to you, that really personal feeling is what makes some of these experiences really unique. But that's still something that we're trying to translate, and there's so few experiences that are actually using AR right now, so it's a really exciting field to be developing in, because there's really no standard. And I'm really curious, Allegra, to hear how you've translated pieces like the Paul McCarthy piece that was shown at Venice a few years ago, where there's all these people around you, and that sense of sort of claustrophobia and people sort of sort of invading your personal space. I'm curious how that translates in AR.
Yeah. Just quickly to address your point about there not being standards for AR, it's true, it's an incredibly interesting space, because if you think about it, AR enables the hijacking of any public space. I mean, you can set up a museum in a park, you can show an artwork in the street. It's a really democratized platform, because there's no, imagine how much virtual space has yet to be brought up, and how eventually it will all be taken over. Now we're in the kind of wild west of AR, where you can set up, you can kind of install it in any way you like. Look at the Serpentine, for example, in London. It's a museum, or it's a space, and they have regular AR shows now, and they set up basically a sculpture park throughout Hyde Park. And I wonder whether in the future that kind of exhibition will be restricted, and there'll be all sorts of health and safety regulations and a specific framework through which you can show work. Whereas now you can kind of do it in any way you like.
This is what also Digital Art Month is doing in New York, effectively creating
totally, yeah,
an open air museum with AR. Yeah,
which is unthinkable in any other medium. Imagine setting up a sculpture in the middle of the street. I mean, it would cause complete, it would be like so anarchic, like everyone would go crazy. But yeah, in answer to your question, how to translate AR, I mean, the problem with the Paul McCarthy, I feel as though the works that we have that exist as VR are bad examples of AR works, because they were really designed to be interactive. I mean, those works are designed to be experienced through the Vive headset in a really interactive way. So they'll never be as good as AR pieces, because you're experiencing them through the phone, and then there's so much lost. But I feel as though there's huge scope. If you're designing something for AR, there's huge scope to do interesting things. I'm really interested, Winslow, about your production process. How is it structured? I mean, how involved are you in production? Do you hire it, or do you outsource any of the work?
Here we go, unmuting. Yeah, so it really depends on the project, but generally I have an understanding of Unreal. We primarily work in Unreal, but compared to some people who are really, like, I would say really pioneering, we try to work with some person who's doing, with each project, somebody who's doing something new in the engine, because then it also is a good, continues our relationship with Epic Games and pushing what's capable, what the engine's capable of doing. So we actually were really fortunate to get a mega grant for Rainforest, and we're actually bringing on some of the same people from Tree to work on that. In Tree, we had an idea. We basically wrote a script for the project, and then we were looking around, and this is Milica Zetz is the co-director of Tree. We were starting the project at the New Museum Incubator, and then when we were actually showing at the Busan Film Festival, we came across Jacob Kudstenson's work on Instagram, and then immediately we messaged him. You can still see, like, made sure I screen grabbed our interaction through Instagram, you know, to sort of like remember how quickly everything happened. But we spoke to him, and then 4 days he was, you know, basically our lead artist on the project. And the thing with Jacob, and what's really amazing if you can work with somebody like him, is somebody who not only understands the sort of the artistic capabilities of the engine, but also the engineering. And we then basically supplemented him with a series of engineers, and we worked with about 4 different sort of game engine and VFX studios to be able to do very simple tasks like Rewind, that's based in the UK, did our leaf cutter ants and our parrots that have a certain flocking algorithm, or that have a landing algorithm that if you put your arm out. We worked with a company called Converge that was able to sort of package everything and work on optimizing it for the game engine. We worked with a group in Denmark called Dikachan that helped us with early prototypes. But the key point is to be able to have a team that can put all that together, so that you're able to almost just like film, look at dailies. And the difference is that you can keep iterating. You know, nothing is ever in the can when it comes to VR. It's very much a, you know, series of cycles where you take what works, you refine those, you put those back in. And, you know, no project, I'm sure as you guys are all familiar, is ever really done when it comes to VR. You know, everything can always be updated. And so that's, you know, while that's a strength, that's also a weakness, because nothing ever feels accomplished. Like we just finished a new version of Tree last week. And who knows, there might be another version as soon as there's, you know, optimization on certain shaders that we can apply. And it feels like, yeah, endless. And, you know, that can be daunting at times, but it's also very liberating.
But does having such a decentralized team where everything is outsourced to different companies, do you think, how far does that take you from the artist's initial conception? Or do you think it actually strengthens the project?
In certain ways, it allows you to do a lot more because you're able to find something very specific. When it comes to really advanced game engine development, sometimes it's really difficult to find somebody who can do, like, instead of hiring a team of 4 people who can do one thing, you want to be able to find that one person who that's their bread and butter, because it makes it a lot easier. You know, if they're doing C++ coding, it's going to be a lot cleaner. It's going to be a lot easier to hand off. It's very much an iterative process, as I was mentioning. So I would say, you know, it's basically just increasing, you know, it's just broadening the canvas. But in many ways, yeah, if you don't understand how to talk to the team or convey things from a creative perspective, things can definitely get lost. And also, if you don't sort of follow strict guidelines and how, you know, information and you know, concepts are going to be passed, then things can definitely get lost in the shuffle. But, you know, a lot of that comes from, I have a background in doing like VR experiences for advertising. You know, that's sort of where I got my you know, working with studios like Framestore. So a lot of that was, you know, understanding how the creative, but also how the organization and how the money works. Because unfortunately, as you mentioned, you know, VR can be quite expensive when producing it. So really sort of, yeah, leaning into the limits, I think is a huge strength, because there's so much you can do. So understanding things, you know, from a very conceptual perspective, but really holding on to that and seeing how you can get from point A to point B with, you know, with a certain set of guidelines is extremely important. Not just sort of opening it up and going totally blue sky.
Can I ask you, and perhaps Myriam and Allegra as well, and Winslow, you might know, what are the resources available out there for artists who love to transition into new media art, so AR or VR, any artist residencies that you're aware of, any potential like Khora production? Do you offer support, like technological support for artists who might want to open up their art production? Are you aware, Myriam, of any potential artist residency at museums or even at Pi Center that you can offer to these kind of artists? What is out there? I'm wondering if you are aware.
So actually there is, like, if I look at the landscape here in Canada, first, there's a lot of public funding available for artists to produce work, new media work. We're very fortunate in Canada to have a system that's really generous. So that's one thing. There are residencies out there. It would be, like, long to give you a list, but we, and this is something like stays between us, but we will announce soon that we will be launching an artist residency for immersive and interactive works. But please don't shout it out there because we didn't announce it yet.
Wait, no, this is going to be on YouTube though. Hang on, we're going to edit it out. We're just going to.
But there is
that's fantastic though.
There's something we're looking up to. They are based in France, but also I think in Great Britain. It's called Art Explora, and it seems really interesting. I mean, I don't know them personally. I want to reach out and try to understand how they work. But there are definitely some interesting residencies out there.
Thank you. And Allegra, from your point of view as a production studio, maybe I misunderstood. I thought Khora would also work directly with artists, or do you only work with institutions?
No, we absolutely work with artists. So sometimes it's a question of artists approaching us with a project in mind. Sometimes we approach artists whose practice we think would lend itself well to the medium. And we receive a lot of applications, and we obviously have limited capability, but we do try and curate as broad a program as we can of artists that we produce works with. And then
do you also offer technological support to develop the project?
We definitely, I would say that the artists that we work with are unable to complete the project without us. So we produce the work for artists that don't know how to, or don't know how to use it or create works themselves.
Yes.
We step in at that stage. But I mean, as Myriam said, there's so much public funding available. And also it's just a question of, learning the skill is really just a question of, I mean, there's so much online. Like it's something that you can teach yourself. It takes time, but there's all the information that one would need online. Just spend time, research. I mean, I'm in contact with a lot of artists that do produce the work themselves, and they've all just taught themselves. So it's definitely accessible. It's just a question of time and energy and will.
I'll try and do the YouTube video on how to produce AR work and see if I can.
Yeah. It's funny because I actually tried to learn because I wanted to be able to understand what the developers were talking about. So I went through the process, and it's time consuming, but it's definitely possible and accessible.
I'll try.
And it's getting easier too.
Sorry, yes.
Well, I was just saying it's getting a lot easier. When I first cracked open, Unreal version 4, when they were first releasing it to the public, it was like very uncharted territory, and also when I was in undergrad, YouTube wasn't around. So you really had to go to a place to take a course. You couldn't just open Chrome and just type in whatever you wanted and have somebody who's 14 years old who already could teach a PhD in the subject, be able to have volumes and volumes of knowledge about it. And in a way too, that doesn't feel like somebody's talking at you. I think it's definitely flipped traditional academia where everyone thinks that they have, the way to do it. And it's a lot more democratized now. And that's really great. And all the video game engines are also free, up until you start making $1 million, then you have to give them a cut. But I think that's a pretty manageable deal. I would also say that, because being in the United States, things are a little bit different. The arts funding is not as generous, and it's unfortunately because of certain factors at play right now, it's getting less so. Hopefully things will change. We won't get into that right now. But, I think what's also different with the United States is understanding how to work with marketing. While we wish that our projects could be wholly funded by artist grants, we found that actually a majority of our funding was from corporations. But making sure that as an artist, understanding how to walk that line, making sure that both, the corporations, whether it's a software or hardware company, or, understanding that they get what they need to out of it. And it's a very, holistic approach, but also that, that we make sure that we, that we hold on to our integrity and that we're not just doing it as a commercial. But, a lot of these companies have, buckets of money for every quarter that they have to allocate for, releasing new products or initiatives, or, basically it's advertising money, but not all of it needs to be spent on traditional marketing. So being able to work with these companies in non-traditional ways, that's really how we were able to fund all of our projects.
Right.
But doing it on our terms and making sure that it works for everybody, and making sure that, contracts are also extremely tight, and, having a good relationship with your lawyer goes a long way. But yeah, in the United States, unfortunately, things are a little bit challenging when it comes to that.
So we want more artists to move over to Europe and create a nice ecosystem, or Canada.
Yeah, I'm game. As soon as these travel bans are off, I'm down to do more work. We're actually working with some people in Canada right now, and we've done a lot of work with people in the UK. So yeah, we're very open to that.
You mentioned briefly in the last comment, gaming. Now, obviously, one of the things that is for me really interesting, and that I've learned in the last few months working with CADAF also, it's the intersection now of new media art and VR, especially with gaming. And of course, VR enhanced the gaming experience. And very recently, actually, with CADAF, we did a happy virtual hour, which is one of our weekly panels, with a Colombian artist, Juan Cortez, who is now building a video game, which is also his artwork. And that was, to me, really fascinating. And I was wondering what you think about this. Is gaming becoming a work of art, or has art learned from the gaming industry and now utilizing that technology, these kind of technologies, to create work of art?
I think it's always been art. I think it's just how it gets contextualized and how sort of people look back on it, and also the organizations that have supported it, who's funding it, and sort of the scale in which it's being appreciated. So I think that there's always been indie games. I would say, there's obviously debate over what constitutes art. Being able to create a really powerful video game experience in the, in the mid 80s with Super Mario, doing things with pixels and sound that have never been done, that's an art form. And the fact that they were able to really encapsulate and galvanize, a whole new generation of video gamers, which then became artists, are definitely, harkening back to these aesthetics that were being used back then. So I think it's really, a question of how it's being, sort of how it's being observed and how it's being consumed. But I think we think of video games as things that are, on major consoles that also have, huge revenue streams that involve, unfortunately, themes of violence. I think that video game violence has actually done a huge disservice to the community and what the capabilities are. And that's one of the reasons we're also working with Epic Games, is to show that it's just a canvas for self-expression, for being able to experience things that are otherworldly, or things that, getting outside of your zone. Empathy, it's an empathy machine. VR is an empathy machine, but also playing a video game that allows you to experience something totally different, whether it's set in the past, the future, in space, underwater. These have all been existing in different forms, but yeah, I think it's now just become more accepted. But yeah, it's always been there.
I totally agree with what Winslow just said, and I think he said it all. And just to give you an example, that for us, video game can definitely be seen as a form of art. In some of our exhibitions at the Phi Center, we in the past, not in the last year, but in like 2 years ago, but 3 years ago, we had, as part of our VR exhibition, we had works that were created by, for instance, by Ubisoft. It was a fit. And I think even Winslow, when we showed Tree, I think we had a work just across from where Tree was installed, if I'm not mistaken.
Right up top, yep.
Yeah, we had a piece from this, you know, like a major studio like Ubisoft. So it shouldn't, like, art, I think that the art scene should not look down on video game, not at all. I think that they both can learn from each other. But I, like, yeah, totally agree with that.
And there's also issues of scarcity too, that sort of traditional art uses to its advantage that video games don't have that issue. You know, you could have an infinite amount of copies of something that you can experience on a computer or through VR, but that changes things. And I think that's something I'm really curious to hear your thoughts of, how scarcity, or how, you know, creating versions of things, or trying to limit that, trying to limit the infinite, you know, and making it then, because art also has to have commerce in order for it to be successful, you know, just like video games.
But I wonder whether the art world can actually learn from this model of kind of using a large audience to create a revenue stream, whether there's something in that. I mean, I know that in terms of the way that we look at distribution, we've learned so much from the way that film is distributed, because, you know, the model of having cinemas and releases and large audiences and ticket sales, all of those things are actually really relevant to VR and the business model that can be used to you know, generate revenue from VR. So I wonder whether actually there's something in letting go of the idea of scarcity and finding new ways of working with, you know, mass audiences to create a, you know, sustainable model for VR going forward. What do you think, Myriam?
I think we can definitely learn. And as you said, you know, like, for me though, like, when you just come, you know, like you said, you learn from the film model, like, distributing. I think it's a mistake to apply the same the same model from the film industry to distributing in VR, because it's different. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
I'd be interested to know, so in what ways do you think it's different?
For instance, you know, that film festivals are requiring a world premiere, let's say, for a film to be shown in a festival. I think to apply that to VR, like some festivals are doing, that they say, we won't take your piece if it's not a world premiere, knowing that VR works can only be seen in it's not as many festivals as, like, for a feature film, you know. So I think we should not apply those same rules to VR pieces as a world premiere in the festival than for, I'm having a hard time to explain, but what I want to say is that it's not good for our medium, for our industry, to ask for world premiere for a VR piece, like a film festival are doing for films, for instance.
Totally. I was really interested, because in the art world, you know how I've always felt that ticketed exhibitions were considered debased. You know, earning money through ticket sales or through massive, you know, immersive interactive events was always there's some snobbery around it, or maybe like some kind of, I don't know. It's not so, and especially showing artworks in venues that have not traditionally been considered art venues. That's, you know, looked down upon, and it's not considered good for the provenance of the work. And there's all these really kind of what do I want to say, like, you know, entrenched ways of working that I think VR breaks down.
Conceptions that if something is shown in a bad venue is not good.
Totally. Whereas actually, I mean, I've been learning from film producers and film production companies who really kind of are a lot freer in the way that they show their works. And I think that the art world has a lot to take from that, because, you know, at the end of the day, the important thing is that good works are being made by good artists, the quality is high, But the problem is, at the moment, there's not enough money for the artist to produce the work, and there's no eventual revenue because there's no way of monetizing the works. Once the work is accessible, once the technology is accessible to everyone, and when it's totally democratized, then the best works will rise up because every artist can get involved. At the moment, that's not the case. So the work is poorer than it should be. It's not as good as it could be because not everyone is involved. So my thinking is just, as much money as we can get into the market, as much money as we can get into that world, just to, like, I don't know, you know, get more people involved and increase the quality. But I don't know what your thoughts are, both of you, Winslow and Myriam, whether you think maybe that we may be on the wrong track.
Sorry, can I just jump in very quickly? So scarcity, for me, if I understand correctly, Winslow, when you say scarcity, is the fact that, you know, you're not able to produce a large number of an artwork, such as, you know, how many sort of games are out there that people can play with, for example. Is that what you meant by sort of scarcity? Is that obviously the production of an artwork, due to the cost behind it of an artwork in VR, for example, the costs are high. It's difficult to replicate so many copies to distribute to a wider audience. Is that what you meant?
Well, yeah, I think that the value of something when it comes to traditional art is often the, you know, obviously the art is the work itself, but, you know, what is the addition? How many of them are out there, and what is its value? Obviously, something
Yes.
that is more scarce will have, you know, higher value, and that's just sort of the model, you know, that you know, a lot of digital artists have had to do as well in order for them to play in that field. If they want to show their works, you know, in the major galleries that are in Chelsea, but are also in, you know, in Soho, or, you know, like all different areas of the world, really,
Yes.
they sort of have to play by these traditional rules, and so they're
Yes.
adopting pieces of maybe outdated, you know, sort of you know, business models, let's say, you know, for making that work, because they have to fit into that world. But we're also seeing that there's, you know, there's other ways in which artists can be selling their work, or other people can be experiencing them. So I think right now we're in an interesting point where, yeah, is art more like video games, or video games more like art? Or, you know, we're in this sort of gray area in between where, you know, maybe it's both, and also something totally new, and, you know, embracing that. And I think that's why places like the Phi Center, and I'm sure, you know, the work, Allegra, that you're doing as well, is really, you know, pivotal to this, because we're creating these new systems that are then being embraced, and, you know, people are seeing that they're successful, and that's really important, because then, you know, then it will give birth to something new afterwards. Like we're still figuring out what it is, so we can't exactly say we've arrived at that, because it's all so new. And yeah, it's just like, what do we, you know, how do we price our work when it, you know, gets released? You know, is it something that we want to show it to as many people as, I mean, obviously we want to show it to as many people as possible, but certain things are lost, and, you know, not everything gets translated the way we originally, you know, wanted it. So there's a lot of issues at play, but I think it's slowly getting resolved, which is nice. Or we're slowly getting to an endpoint, which we can all agree on.
I mean, I think historically scarcity has always been a synonym for higher value in general in the traditional art world sense. Is obviously if it's a unique piece is more valuable than a multiple piece, and that's sort of a general. But I think that doesn't necessarily, for me, translate into new media art, because the nature of the media itself allows for obviously a higher reproduction, and it's the whole point. It's also to experience the artwork, you know, or to allow the wider audience to experience the artwork, and it becomes an immersive experience. So the nature of new media art, I think, to me, should be, you know, shown as much as possible. And I have a feeling
maybe something quick.
Sorry.
No, but it would be interesting right now in London at Christie's. There's an auction for
Marina Abramovic,
a mixed reality piece. Yeah, Marina Abramovic, and I think it's you know, like, it's available now until, I don't know, next week, and then it's going to auction. It will be interesting to see what the numbers will be, you know, like, for like how much will that be sold for, like, And just curious, like, I don't know if some of you are based in London right now, but it would be interesting, like you could go and experience the piece actually.
Well, it's the first piece of that kind, certainly, that crosses the door at Christie's. So the fact that already like a piece of mixed media art has crossed the secondary market. Well, although Christie's also sold a piece of crypto art. So I think at least they're moving into more of a art and tech. And it's great. It shows that perhaps for those kind of pieces, and I think I will certainly look at the result, but the fact that it's produced in higher number doesn't necessarily go with lower value. And that I think it's a point for new media art, which is different than from more traditional physical art, which is kind of the opposite for me. Yeah. So we only have 4 minutes left. I think from my point of view, it flew by this. I didn't even realize that it was already an hour that we were talking. There was just one comment, and I don't know if I'd like to open up to the audience. If you have any questions, this is a good time, or comments to say. But there was a comment from Candice earlier on about the Oculus Quest headset. She says, unfortunately, you can only really use it indoor because the weather can really damage the sensors. So she says, unfortunately, VR is an indoor activity for now. And I didn't know this. Is it really like this? Also, in your experience, we cannot take sort of a VR outside because of the technology, or the limit of the technology right now?
But I think Candice sent it. Candice, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you send it while we were having a conversation about AR and how you could put on an AR show wherever? And I meant more in the sense that AR on your phone. It's true that you couldn't. There are, like, the technology itself is limited, but tablets and phones mean that you can put on an outdoor show. And actually, the Serpentine uses tablets and encourage people to download an app or use a QR code, follow a QR code path on their phone.
Yeah.
So I think
and I guess the technology is always updating itself. One of the questions that we didn't really have time to discuss was obviously about the technology and how we can make sure that once we have a VR artwork, then the technology doesn't become obsolete and it continues to evolve. Maybe the next panel on VR, we'll talk about that. But I guess, so maybe now it's an indoor activity for now, but nothing's to say that from tomorrow it will change and you can take it sort of outdoors as well. I think if there are no sort of further questions, we could wrap it up, I would say. So I will thank you again for being here, Myriam, Winslow, and Allegra. This has been, I would like to continue the conversation because this is very, very interesting. So I'm not, maybe if you're willing, later on, we could do a part 2, perhaps also when the museum is open again, Myriam, and we can talk a little bit more, because I find this, yes, incredibly instructive anyway, for me, and I'm sure for everyone. And it's great to also hear about your project, Winslow, and also you, Allegra, with the Khora Contemporary.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for organizing this. I think it's really important to talk about VR as much as possible, that VR becomes, that we can democratize also the access to VR. It's highly important, definitely.
Yes, agree.
And let us know about the happy virtual hour.
Yes, definitely. Yes, we will resume the happy virtual hours for sure after Digital Art Month is over in New York City. So we will let you know. Yes.
Thanks so much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.